Nash Alta. Adventure level 9. Orc. Nulivan. York and I watched in alarmed disbelief as Nick sprinted off into the forest. His sudden departure left me in a bind. I couldn't go after him because that would involve leaving York behind, who would not be able to keep pace with us due to his back. My concern for Nick waned a bit when I remembered what the fair folk had said regarding our ability to travel their territory, though. They won't mess with him, and he's strong enough to be able to hold his own against most of the monsters and animals around these parts. He's apparently fast enough to outrun the ones he can't, too, though whether or not he's smart enough to make that decision is another matter entirely. I shrugged and turned back to Tits and Algebron. "Well, I guess it's time for us to get going," I said.
"Indeed it is," Algebron smiled warmly. "See you later."
Later. York and I waved as we left the clearing, following Nick's hastily made path. We had to watch our step because of the undergrowth that littered the ground. How the boy managed to sprint through this without breaking his neck is a wonder. Despite the distractions of the undergrowth and my desire to yell at Nick, I found my mind wandering back to what Algebron had said. It wasn't an uncommon way to say goodbye, but it struck me as odd that it came from a fae. Was it truly a farewell, or was it intended to be a premonition? "Hey, York, what do you suppose Algebron meant?" I asked. When it said, "see you later," I mean.
"I very much doubt it was utilising the colloquialism," York chuckled. "The real question is, when will it see us later and under what circumstances?"
"That's 2 questions," I said.
"No, it isn't."
"Yeah, it is."
"No. By adding the and, I chained the thoughts together to form one coherent question. If I were able to write it down, you would see."
"Trying to use your advantage of being able to read, eh?" I said, unable to hide my grin. "That's how I know I'm right."
"Oh, I see. You're playing the fool."
York returned my grin.
"You know, it's quite the convincing act. So convincing, in fact, that I'm not entirely convinced it is an act."
I laughed at the insult, and we continued walking through the forest. Eventually, the trees and undergrowth thinned out, making things much easier on York. "Come to think of it, Algebron didn't specify that we would see each other," I said.
"That's true," he replied. "Perhaps they were hinting at a plan to keep us under surveillance."
"Could be," I nodded, as we left the woods and began following the road. "Tits all but confirmed your theory that they aren't bound to the forest."
"Indeed. It's unlikely that she would mistakenly believe she could accompany Nick on our journey. Regardless, I doubt we have anything to fear from archfey surveillance."
"I guess you're right. Oh, look!" I pointed to the cart. "Algebron's spell is gone."
Imlaw, Olmira, and Nick were chatting as they waited for us. The conversation grew silent as we approached, and Nick's eyes glued themselves to the ground. He rubbed the back of his neck and cleared his throat.
He began. "Don't you fucking me," I angrily interrupted. "The hell did you run off for? It's not like we could keep up, what with York's back. Were you so embarrassed by the attention of Tits that you lost your reason?"
"That's a hell of a sentence," Imlaw chuckled.
My glare shifted to the gnome, and he lifted his hands in apology. I turned my attention back to Nick, who was still staring at the dirt, as if it were going to do a trick.
Look, I was scared," he explained. "Cass means everything to me, and I haven't had anyone else show interest so aggressively."
I opened my mouth to chastise him further, but York snorted. "That's just cute," he said quietly. "Cute?" I asked, less quietly.
"Nash, relax. I'm the injured party here, and you're much angrier than I am. While I appreciate your concern, you would do well to remember that he's not that far removed from childhood."
"We don't just abandon each other, brother. Even children know that."
"It isn't as if we was left surrounded by monsters, or—"
"That's debatable. The fair folk don't see things the same way that we do. Acts we see as monstrous, they see as mundane entertainment." Regardless, we were and are safe. and Nick has not demonstrated the kind of personality that would have left us if we hadn't been, York said sternly, clapping his hands to indicate the conversation was over. Now let's get going. We've got a lot of ground to cover. I gave Nick one last glare, and we all loaded back into the cart and continued our journey. Things were tense at first, but eventually the atmosphere eased up. We settled into a pattern of sleeping, eating, driving, training, eating, driving, and sleeping. For the first day or two, I took out my anger with Nick in our training sessions. Once my anger was abated, I eased up on the boy, allowing me to notice that he had actually made a lot of progress. On the fourth day, his training sword managed to find my neck, and he expertly held it there without harming me. Good, I said, pushing the sword away. Your footwork is a little sloppy, but you're finally starting to understand the basics of swordsmanship. Awesome, Nick replied, collapsing to the ground and panting. What comes after the basics? Expert drills, which are much more difficult and dangerous. There are many ways to wield a sword, and each sword and wielder has their own strengths and weaknesses within each form, I explained, while gathering up his sword. The wielder must be made aware of these strengths and weaknesses and memorize them. I'll be able to take you through the first few drills, but then we'll have to find a swordmaster. Really? Why? Because expert drills are done with real swords, and I'm a generalist in the art of bladed weaponry. If I try to lead you through specialist training, it's likely to end in injury. The bad kind of injury. I can heal us, he said with a grin. Not without your head, I said without expression. One slash in the wrong direction, and it's all over. Nick's grin faded as the realization of how dangerous this training could be dawned on him. Before I could hammer the point further, the sound of hoofbeats caught my ears. Nick heard them too, and we both walked to the road to see who was coming. Two Narses carrying orcs wearing the messenger uniforms of Kokena rode towards us. Both Narses also carried large sacks, which were no doubt full to the brim with mail. I waved a greeting, and to my surprise they stopped to speak with us. Ho there! One of the messengers greeted us. Are you the ones that High Chief Olmira sent to Bolasir? Of course they are, the other said, pointing to Nick. That's the human. We are indeed. What business have we? I asked. I'm Frillick. This is Poma, the first orc said. You wouldn't happen to be trailed by an army, would you? No, they left before we did. Damn it, Poma said. The High Chief was hoping we'd be able to intercept them. Why is that? The invasion has been thwarted. Their reinforcement is no longer necessary. Really? Already? Oh yes, Frillick said with a grin. And it's quite the tale too. Get this. Our boys tamed a Nahalim and used it to break through the Drow's defenses. My eyes widened and I let out a low whistle. That's not all, Poma added. Turns out the leader of the invasion force was a half-vampire drow. The sick fuck was using his own sister as a blood bank. Well, that's going to be a black eye for Loffin, York said as he approached. Damn right, and the bastard deserves it too, Frillick spat. So there's no point in us carrying on in this direction because the Elven army isn't behind you, right? Correct. I would assume that they took the adventurer path, York said. But that path is impassable. Landslide, yes? Yes. Then they'll likely be able to clear the obstacle using their army, York smiled. The United Chieftains probably won't even have to foot the bill. High Chief Olmira would be pleased with that, at least. I doubt the Elven General will be, though. Much less the Regent. Oh, we don't have to worry about the Regent anymore. What do you mean? King Asinrath, the High Dragon, has awakened. York's smile turned into a grin. He's retaken his place as ruler of Bolasir. The two messengers sat upon their narses with their mouths agape. Their flummoxed expressions were well-founded. This news would have interesting effects throughout the chiefdoms, maybe even the entire continent. Well, I think High Chief Olmira will want to hear about that, Frillick said. You want to go tell him, or should I? Why not both of us? Poma asked. One of us has to backtrack down the adventurer path and intercept Bolasir's army.
Damn, would be nice to get off the road for a bit, but I don't have any idea how the High Chief's gonna react to the news about the dragon. Poma rubbed his chin. I'll find the army, you go tell the High Chief. Sounds like a plan, Frilick said, turning back to us. Alright, we're off. Have a good journey. You too, I nodded. The pair of messengers turned their horses around and began travelling back the way they came. You know, it didn't actually occur to me that High Chief Ulamak might be angry that Kinnisingraf has awakened, Yulk said. When we report, do you think we should leave out how he was awakened? Nick asked. No, I answered. The High Chief may be angry with you, but you're a member of the Altar family. You'll be safe from his wrath. Plus, he'd be even angrier if he were to find out we admitted the truth. Indeed. Best to get it over and done with as soon as we can, Yulk nodded. We should tell him about the entity that visited your dreams as well. He might have some information to share with us. Really? How? Nick asked. He's royalty. A legitimate member of the Orcish royal line, one of the few remaining royal families. That doesn't just come with power, it comes with knowledge and secrets. It's entirely possible that he doesn't know anything about gods or higher beings, but it shouldn't hurt to ask. But what if he's one of the Mer about to do a stupid thing? Did he strike you as particularly stupid? I asked. No, Nick paused. But you don't have to be stupid to do stupid things. True, but the higher one in your dream said stupid Mer doing stupid things. Since Ulamak isn't a stupid Mer, I don't think we have to worry. Yeah, but we have plenty of time to think about this, York interrupted. We should get back on the road. After a moment of hesitation, Nick and I nodded our agreement, and the three of us packed our stuff back onto the cart. Olmira and Imlaw were already waiting for us, and once we loaded up, we started moving again. Olmira had been uncomfortably quiet since our encounter with the Fae, and I decided to try to ease this discomfort by breaking the silence. So, I began. Olmira, you're not actually Olmira, or, like, how does that work? That's the most awkward question I've ever heard, she laughed. Yes and no. I have all the memories of Olmira and all of the memories of the Fae that I was before becoming an undead. Well, maybe not all of them. It's been a long time and I've forgotten a lot. So, you're like two people merged into one? Nick asked. Kind of. It is somewhat difficult to explain. Technically, I am no longer Olmira, but I think like Olmira and feel like Olmira. It kind of feels like the Fae memories were just something I picked up along the way. Why didn't you tell me of this? York asked with a carefully neutral tone. I am sorry, York. It never really came up. And let's face it, your ideas about vampires and the undead were much more logical than the truth of the matter. Plus, I wasn't entirely convinced the memories were real in the first place. I do remember a situation exactly as the Fae described while I was being turned, but it was as if it was buried within my subconscious. I genuinely don't believe I would have been able to properly eloquate the thought before our encounter with the fair folk, Olmira said, then sighed. Those are just excuses, though. Truthfully, I was afraid of what you might think. What do you mean? Well, you might have conflated me with the Fae that I apparently used to be and see me as a monster. Or worse, you may have had questions that I had no answer to, and believed me to be a fool. Either way, it would have been difficult to maintain our relationship as student and teacher. Nick, Imlaw and I sat uncomfortably as the air thickened with awkward emotion. Every second that York spent formulating his response felt like an eternity. You have mistaken me, York said softly. I do not judge others on the actions they took eras ago, nor do I conflate ignorance with foolishness. It would be a lie to say that I wouldn't have seen you in a different light, but I would have proudly continued to benefit from your instruction. I see. It would appear that my reasons for the secret were more wounding than the secret itself. Once again, I apologize. It's forgiven, he smiled. I don't expect you... What? I said it's forgiven. There's no point in dwelling over it, especially since you're remorseful. Friends keep secrets from each other all the time, and this is likely one of the least harmful of those secrets. I probably have a secret or two as well, though none come to mind. So, what? That's it?
Olmira asked incredulously.
You don't see me any differently?
Of course I do, York laughed. Apparently you're much more knowledgeable than I had previously believed, which means you still have more to teach me. It never even occurred to me that you may be a font of information regarding the Fae. Obviously, I quite like to maintain our relationship as student and teacher, as well as our friendship.
Oh, Of course.
The air cleared as the pair smiled at each other, and we continued our journey to Kirkenna.